Few manufacturers boast a history that spans quite as long as Cadillac's, with over 120 years in the game and countless successful models under their belt. Mostly, Cadillac is famed for its mass-produced luxury cars, with the Escalade headlining the current crop, in addition to high-performance models, which adorn the Blackwing nameplate. However, in the past, Cadillac was perhaps a little more inventive and indulged in styling experiments, which led to several unique and impressively scarce models. The example we explore throughout this video comes from humble beginnings, based upon one of the more commonly found 50s Cadillacs. But this 1953 Series 62 coupe was completely restyled into the rarest production Cadillac ever to grace the roads. While for the most part, Cadillac history is decorated with some seriously luxurious models which we are mostly familiar with, several elusive gems are also scattered throughout. One such gem is the 1953 Series 62 coupe, which was based on a typical Cadillac chassis, but then completely redesigned by renowned coach builder Ghia. Famed for their beautiful and often European creations, Ghia was the perfect choice for helping Cadillac produce a top-flight coupe for the luckiest customers with the deepest pockets. This was never to be an exercise of mass production, as only 2 examples were ever planned for production, both of which survive today in superb condition. Underneath the gorgeous coach-built bodywork is an everyday Cadillac Series 62, so at least parts are easily available when it comes to the service and maintenance of these unicorn classics. Much of the history of these 2 cars is unknown, as virtually no in-period documentation exists today. However, it's largely believed that one car was delivered new to John Perona, who was the owner of Manhattan's El Morocco nightclub. This is easily believable, as he was a big fan and frequent customer of Ghia cars. The other car is thought to have belonged to actress Rita Hayworth, although no concrete evidence exists to put her behind the wheel, so it may just be a rumor. Being a luxurious Cadillac from the 1950s, there could only ever be one type of engine under the hood, and naturally, that would be a V8. Specifically, a 5.4-liter V8 which packs a 210 horsepower punch, in addition to producing 3 30-pound-feet of torque. In terms of performance specs, such things as 0 to 60 times and top speeds are unknown, given the limited production and intended purpose of this rarest of Cadillacs. However, it's worth noting that 210 horsepower was an awful lot in the early 1950s. This was a time when 100 horsepower was something to brag about, so while the figure seems low for today's world, it was an industry-leading figure at the time. As an example, the stylish and sporting Maserati 150 GT Spider from the mid-1950s had no more than 130 horsepower to play with. Besides, these cars were meant to impress in another way, by simply looking incredible. If anything, the curvaceous lines and striking proportions of the Series 62 Ghia coupe looks even more impressive today than it would have in the 1950s. Despite only commissioning 2 cars, Cadillac decided that certain features should differ between both examples. Or perhaps the paying customers did, we can't be sure, as the evidence simply isn't there. Either way, they are both easily distinguished from one another, thanks to a selection of unique features. One car, which now resides at the famous Peterson Museum, is finished in a deep red color, but the differences don't stop there. The grille, for instance, features an egg crate design and is chromed, whereas the other car's grille consists only of vertical slats, and they are finished in a striking gold color, as are the wheels. Around back, the Peterson example has different taillights, a different rear license holder, and, back to the front again, a full-width front bumper. In contrast, the other example boasts a simpler look to the front, with only bumperettes instead. Arguably, these differences from the factory actually make each car a true one of one instead of a one of two. Needless to say, owning such a stylish and unique car does not come cheap. Sadly, the original prices paid are unknown, although there are recent auction records, at least for one car. Specifically, it's the black example with gold highlights which sold back in 2016 at an RM Sotheby's auction. The auction description describes how the car was restored by renowned specialist Mike Fennell, who is best known for his work on classic American cars and top-end hot rods. This, no doubt, helped the car achieve an impressive final price of $1,430,000, which was in line with RM Sotheby's lower-end estimates. As for what these examples would fetch today, it's anyone's guess. In order to put that price into perspective, Haggerty pegs a standard non-Ghia tweaked Series 62 coupe at $52,300. That's an immaculate Concours condition, and specified with the same 210 horsepower 331 Ci V8. Any gearheads who are familiar with Cadillac will know that they're no strangers to a concept car or prototype. Concepts aren't always even realized in the material world, which is the case with many of these designs, whereas prototypes are usually only manufactured as one-offs, with no ambitions to ever make it through to production. The 1959 Cyclone concept is one of the more striking creations from Cadillac, boasting retro-futuristic styling and even a transparent bubble canopy as opposed to a typical roof structure. Later concepts include the CN and Seal. The former celebrated 100 years of Cadillac in 2002, whereas the latter hails from 2011, yet boasts styling cues and proportions from the excessive 1970s. Perhaps the most impressive is the 2003 Cadillac 16 concept car, which was penned to include a monstrous V16 engine. The 13.6-liter lump planned to pack a Veyron rivaling 1,000 horsepower, and surely would have been the last word in luxury motoring.
1949 to 1951, Mercury 8. Although always a niche brand in the greater scheme of things, Mercury looms large over the early hot rod scene due to the enduring popularity of the 1949 to 1951 Mercury 8. With its pontoon fenders and fastback roofline, the two-door coupe edition of the 8 became the canvas of choice for both DIY builders and professional shops that would follow in their footsteps. In particular, the Mercury 8 became notorious for the lead sled look, which made use of a chopped roof, rear wheel well covers, a lowered suspension, and Frenched headlights up front to further extend the car's sleek body style. Embraced by pioneers like Sam Barris, movies like Rebel Without a Cause also helped popularize the lead sled ideal throughout the 1950s. James Dean's smoldering screen presence more than rubbed off on the Mercury, which became the period's most enduring symbol. 1957 to 1991, Mercury Colony Park. In the era of the station wagon, the Mercury Colony Park was one of the most appealing options for families wanting to step into something a little different from the Fords or Chevrolets sitting in their neighbors' driveways. Exterior wood paneling was almost always on the menu. Given the brand's ability to churn out full-size sheet metal that moved gracefully from the fins of the late 50s to the slab sides of 1960s and to the hidden headlights of the 70s, the Colony Park retained charm and style while also delivering up to 8 seats of bus-like practicality. Available for decades with a big block V8 under the hood, the Mercury Colony Park was also a stealth performer that could light up the tires when driven home empty after the morning school drop-off. Its disappearance in the early 90s marked the end of Mercury's big wagon game and the beginning of its less successful embrace of the minivan era. 1969 to 1970, Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2. For many years, Mercury was almost as involved in NASCAR as Ford was, and the Cyclone Spoiler 2 was its most potent performer. Built in the same vein as Chrysler's winged cars and the Ford Torino Talladega, the Spoiler 2 was a homologation car intended to sell in precisely the mandated amount required to make it legal to put on the track as a stock machine. So what made it special? The car's front clip was replaced with a sleeker version that produced less drag, complete with a modified recessed bumper. And the car's fastback silhouette and reshaped body also helped it cut through the air. A 351 cubic inch V8 motivated the car. For 1970, Mercury wanted to take things to the next level with the Spoiler 2 by introducing a radical coupe that completely smoothed out its grille and hood, introducing a hump where upright chrome had once lived, and replacing its headlights with tiny square projectors. Budget cuts killed the Spoiler 2, but not before a few prototypes were built with a 429 cubic V8 under the hood. 1969 till 1970 Mercury Cougar Eliminator. The Mercury Cougar presented an intriguing counterpoint to the Ford Mustang when it arrived in 1967 as a somewhat larger, more luxury-oriented version of the same platform. The 1969 Eliminator model put an emphasis on performance by adopting many of the updates that had been made to the Trans Am Racing version of the car. Specifically, the Cougar Eliminator benefited from the inclusion of an air dam, rear wing, and hood scoop, which increased its visual aggression, if not necessarily its wind tunnel performance. Sitting under that scoop were a choice of V8 engines, including a 250 horsepower, 351 cubic inch unit standard, a 320 horsepower, 390 cubic inch mill, or a 335 horsepower, 427 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8. Eventually, the Boss 302 V8 also became available with the Eliminator, as well as a 370 horses Boss 429 V8. 1969 to 1970, Mercury Marauder X100. Although the Marauder name had been around for quite some time as the high-performance badge for Mercury's larger sedans and coupes, the X100 was a step above both in terms of attitude and design. Built on the automaker's full-size two-door platform, the Marauder X100 featured big block V8 power, with a 360 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque from 429 cubic inches, as well as a suspension tune that tried to rein in its tremendous bulk. Styled to pierce the eye and large enough to block out the sun, the Marauder X100 was one of the final specialty performance vehicles built by the brand alongside its Cyclone and Cougar cousins. (1970) Mercury Cyclone spoiler, 429 Super Cobra Jet. Not quite as big as the Marauder, but certainly no shrinking violet, the Cyclone spoiler 429 Super Cobra Jet was the drag strip's answer to the Spoiler 2. Featuring one of the longest and most descriptive names of the muscle car era, the 429 Super Cobra Jet was redesigned compared to the previous year's spoiler, and its chunkier looks were far more extroverted and less concerned with oval racing aero. The attractive coupe's most intriguing feature was found under the hood, where a 429 cubic inch Super Cobra Jet V8, rated at 375 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque, was fed a steady diet of cool air thanks to the ram air system built into the hood. That horsepower rating was a bit of a wink at the insurance companies of the day, as it posted only a 5-pony increase over the regular Cobra Jet V8. Some estimates put its true output at nearly 450 horsepower. An included competition handling package provided a suspension upgrade to go with the coupe's power boost.
That was pretty good.
1999 till 2002, Mercury Cougar. It's a well-kept secret that Ford had a competitive compact car platform available at the end of the 1990s. The Ford Contour SVT was an overlooked performance machine that handled much better than many of its contemporaries. But the Mercury Cougar, which offered a two-door hatch interpretation of the same chassis, was a far more stylish option. Featuring up to 170 horsepower from a V6 engine, the Cougar was fun and easy on the eyes. Unfortunately, Mercury's brand identity had virtually evaporated over the course of the past 20 years, which meant past Cougar buyers were confused when the badge was no longer being applied to a sedate two-door personal luxury coupe, and potential new customers had no idea it existed. The Cougar left the market in 2002 before it could build much of a following or benefit from the full SVT treatment. 2003 and 2004 Mercury Marauder. Mercury briefly revived the Marauder name for a special edition of the Grand Marquis sedan in the early 2000s. Featuring a 32-valve version of the Fomoco 4.6-liter V8 engine, the new Marauder offered 305 horses and was dressed in monochromatic black, silver, blue, or red. Handling was enhanced by digging into the P71 Police Interceptor parts bin, and the interior was given a somewhat sportier look. Unfortunately, Mercury was circling the drain at this point, and the Marauder ended up as a what might have been footnote rather than a rebirth for the automaker.